Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jennifer, and you are listening to the Ego Next Door podcast. Today, we are diving into a powerful and often overlooked topic: pleasure, intimacy, and connection after long-term trauma. We will explore why experiencing intimacy, whether emotional, physical, or sexual, can feel complicated or even overwhelming for trauma survivors. I want to make it clear that this episode is not about sexual trauma specifically. It applies to anyone who has endured long-lasting or intense trauma and finds themselves struggling to reconnect with their body, their desires, and their relationships. I will also share a personal story to make this topic easier to understand, offering context and hopefully a sense of encouragement. Now let's get started. So, why does trauma complicate intimacy? We frequently blame intimacy issues on poor relationships or low self-esteem, but in many circumstances, the underlying cause is a lot more complex. When we think about difficulties with intimacy and trauma, the general cause is automatically assumed to be due to confidence issues or bad romantic experiences, relationships, or physical encounters that were quite negative. However, that is not always the case. In fact, sometimes past trauma might have absolutely nothing to do with intimacy or sex per se. What past trauma may do is leave lingering feelings related to a difficulty in opening up, not only with others, but with ourselves. This has proved to be the case with many people I have talked to and in my personal experience as well. I am all too familiar with this. Before I began analyzing my own experiences, I struggled to understand why intimacy and proximity made me squirm. Personally speaking, I had trouble with feeling ready to open up in any sort of way, whether that was just kissing someone or even hugging, and from that to more intimate things, such as sex. Because of my past, especially emotional trauma, although I couldn't consciously link it to a specific type of childhood abuse trauma, I didn't understand why the thought of intimacy startled me. However, when the opportunities would arise, I would completely flinch and be unable to actually feel comfortable or ready in that situation. Now, yes, this also means the topic of self-exploration in a sexual way. I am fully aware that talking about these topics might make a lot of people feel uncomfortable, but my main goal here is to break down stigmas and approach topics that can be difficult to talk about, especially when you are going through these discomforts and feeling like you are alien in a world where everybody seems to be comfortable with sharing physical moments with others, allowing access to themselves sexually, or even exploring and indulging with their own pleasure. But turns out I wasn't alone in this. According to research, trauma survivors frequently develop and mature sexually before their counterparts. That is, particularly those who have experienced childhood trauma tend to develop earlier in areas such as sexuality, libido, and fantasies. But here's the intriguing part. Developing and maturing prematurely does not imply ease with intimacy. It also does not mean that trauma survivors are actually actively engaging in these thoughts. In fact, many feel blocked and frozen in place when confronted with in real life situations that expose them to the reality of physical contact. But why does this happen? Why can intimacy feel unsafe if the trauma was not specifically sexual? The answer lies in how trauma rewires our sense of control and self-worth. This is the interesting point. If the trauma was not sexual per se, why would someone who craves intimacy fear it and not be able to just relax? Well, it's actually pretty self-explanatory because when you go through any period of trauma, and we are talking about emotional trauma, physical trauma, and even trauma from accidents or injury, what often happens is that we lose control of our emotions and reactions, whether in the long term or in that specific short term moment. Our brain's way of protecting itself is to enter a fully alert mode all of the time. This is also known as hyperarousal, and this is what makes it difficult to relax. Not only does this hyper alertness impact how we feel, but it also impacts our interpersonal relationships. After experiencing something that left us feeling helpless, maintaining control becomes a survival instinct. Yet, this survival instinct is also responsible for making it almost impossible for us to relax. It is indeed a paradox. Often, trauma survivors believe that they deserved the bad things that happened to them. And this might not be a very conscious thought. For instance, if you ask someone if they think they deserve it, they might say no. However, sometimes the belief that we deserve something is so internalized that we don't realize we are behaving in a way that sabotages ourselves, punishing ourselves for things that are not our fault. You might have an internalized guilt for something that happened to you that was not your fault, but it is so deeply ingrained within yourself that you cannot actually acknowledge it because the realization hasn't come to light yet. I also fell into a similar trap. Even though I didn't realize it at the time, my inability to authentically connect with others, express myself, and discern what I felt comfortable with kept me in relationships that weren't good for me. Because, ironically enough, stress and discomfort felt familiar, and connection did not. And so, very often, trauma survivors believe that they don't deserve pleasure, that they don't deserve to relax. Being a workaholic and always being in charge and in control feels not only safe, but like the way to live. However, when we are always tense and trying to control every situation, we end up missing out on things that naturally happen when we are not vigilant or hyper vigilant. I'm not saying that we should not be vigilant when things happen around us. We certainly should have some kind of awareness, but there is a difference between awareness and vigilance. When it comes to pleasure, we are often so tense that we cannot relax. These are two key points: the inability to relax because we are so tense, and the subconscious belief that we do not deserve pleasure. This leads to a difficulty in not only accessing that part of ourselves, but also in relaxing into it and being able to ultimately express it to another person. And there is a deeper element to this too. Feeling worthy is just as important as feeling in control. Now, here's the story. When I started being more intimately active with someone, I did not feel comfortable at all with that person. It took me a long time to open up in a more intimate way, and for well over a year, we kept things above the belt. However, I felt coerced into actually giving in and being sexual with this person. I felt very conflicted because I didn't want to, but I felt like if I said no, I would risk losing them. I thought they would leave me because of this, so I said yes. But even after that first time, I felt extremely uncomfortable and not good at all about the situation. So I ignored that fact and remained in this relationship dynamics for 5 more years. This was because I had so much difficulty opening up in that way that once I did, I felt like there was no going back because I wouldn't be able to go through that entire process with someone else again. This held me back from realizing that the relationship I was in was actually abusive. I had already opened up to this person and I knew how difficult it had been with them. So starting over with someone else was unfathomable to me. The second issue was that I had not really explored my own sexuality by myself before starting a sexual relationship with someone. This proved to be a great mistake and made me realize that maybe that's why a lot of trauma survivors stay in abusive relationships. I didn't know how to access that on my own, not even with him, let alone by myself. In fact, and according to research, that is one of the reasons. It didn't help that in that relationship, I had essentially vowed to not self-pleasure at all. Wild, right? Well, besides being a narcissist, my boyfriend at the time had a very low self-esteem. So anything that regarded me doing something for myself was close to unacceptable in his eyes. So after that relationship ended, the greatest revelation I had was realizing that before I could open up to others in a healthy way, I would need to learn how to connect with myself first. I had a lot of trouble reaching the point in my life where I was able to just let go. This is a big thing because we usually focus on giving ourselves to someone else. But can we really do that from a place of comfort where we feel that the relationship is consensual? Can we do that if we have not learned to give ourselves to ourselves and explored our own sexuality first on our own? This, of course, brings us to self-pleasure and masturbation. I felt like I couldn't do it. I had so much difficulty taking the initiative or even doing anything related to sexuality because during it and afterwards, I would feel this sense of shame as if I shouldn't be doing it. This is often the case with trauma survivors. We feel like we don't deserve that pleasure, and not only do we feel like we don't deserve it by ourselves, we also feel like we cannot express it in front of another person. So how do we begin? Well, I believe that the first step to getting out of stress mode is learning to feel comfortable in our bodies again or for the first time ever. For me, the trauma and the need to be in control of the situation and not let go physically was so ingrained that I even had fear in expressing any kind of joy or enjoyment to someone else in doing simple things like receiving a hug from someone. So the question is, how do we solve this problem? And is there science that can guide us? Well, there are some ways, and I'm going to share one that helped me personally. First of all, you have to learn how to relax in your own body and feel safe. Something as simple as self-care practices such as taking a warm bath for yourself, using moisturizer on your skin after a shower, going to a hair salon and letting someone touch your hair and scalp, or ultimately getting a massage by a massage therapist. Now, this last one was quite challenging for me, and I kept putting it off for a long time, especially because I didn't want to express that something was pleasurable to me. Not only sexually, but on a surface level, such as with a massage as well. Maybe it had to do with being raised in an environment where everything was based on criticism and looking out for faults and bad things in every situation. Or Maybe it was just not feeling safe in my own body because of the physical abuse I had gone through as a child. But either way, this was a barrier that made me unable to just enjoy the present moment in life. All I knew is that I felt extremely uncomfortable with just the idea of laying down on a massage bed and letting someone else do something nice for me, even if it was their job and a paid service that they were providing. But one day, eventually, my psychologist challenged me and said, "Go ahead and get a massage. Try to start with a female physical therapist first. Then once you feel more comfortable, you can do that with a male therapist as well." So why did gender matter so much to me? It wasn't because my trauma was more related to a man than a woman. I was abused by both my mother and my father. But I believe it's because I am mostly heterosexual, and it felt odd to be in a position where I was relaxed and being physically touched by the gender that I am mostly physically attracted to, even if the situation was not sexual at all. So I tried it. It was very uncomfortable for me, but afterwards it felt very liberating. I finally felt like I could do something normal and feel normal for once. So how did this help? What did it do? It helped me realize that it's okay to receive something nice from someone and allow myself that physical relaxation. And yes, physical relaxation, even in a professional setting, can ultimately translate to an intimate sexual part as well, and to pleasure in general regarding intimacy. So by learning to feel physically relaxed in our bodies while something pleasurable is happening to us can be very effective, and it can lift the pressure out of starting to learn more about our own bodies. In this example that I just gave you, I also wondered if empowering others and talking about it more freely maybe would help me feel empowered and explore my own self. And this was enlightening because people often think that sexuality is about being promiscuous, but it's not. Sexuality is health. It is part of our human experience. It is self-expression and necessary to live a fulfilling life. If there is one thing I want you to keep in mind, it's that you deserve to heal, regardless of how long it takes. You are worthy of connection, intimacy, and pleasure, not just with other people, but with yourself too. Because if we only learn stress and pain and we have no way to wind down and feel a positive experience in our own bodies, it's very hard to live a healthy, thriving life where we can feel empowered. So these were my closing thoughts for this episode, and I really hope that it helped you learn something and maybe even support yourself or a partner better through this. And remember that whatever you went through, you deserve love and you deserve to feel good and at ease with your body. That is the most important thing. On the next episode, we will dive into the concept of closure, what it means, why it's important, and how to move on and navigate life even when closure isn't really an option. Thank you for listening to the Ego Next Door podcast. See you soon, and I hope you have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to hear more, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at Ego Next Door. And if you would like to support my work, consider becoming a patron to my Patreon creator page at Jennifer Hachia. The Ego Next Door podcast is presented solely for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The content here is not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, or medical treatment of a qualified healthcare provider. Reliance on any information provided here is at your own risk. If you or someone you know is in crisis or experiencing suicidal thoughts, please reach out immediately to someone who can help right away. Call your national emergency services or go to the nearest hospital.